When the Signal Fails, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the AI Drone, an original podcast series by the Whispers of Lysa Gora. Project Episode 1, Engineered. 6:30 hours Eastern Standard Time, White House, West Wing. Julia Adler had always believed that America would see it coming. Whatever it was, war, pandemic, collapse, she believed the warning lights would blink red in time. The headlines would flare, the generals would confer, the press briefings would sharpen. But today, 3 days before it all began, there were no blinking lights. Just the hum of recycled air and the growing smell of Lysol in every hallway. She stepped into the West Wing press bullpen with her coffee in hand and a CDC packet under her arm. Across the lobby, her deputy Jason was already fielding calls.
3 deaths overnight in Kansas City, 2 more in Nashville. All same symptoms, rapid neural degradation. We've got reports of hemorrhaging now.
This isn't flu.
No one's calling it that anymore.
She walked briskly into her office and slammed the door. The folder under her arm was stamped CDC Red Level and filled with early draft reports from quarantined ERs across 7 states. Nearly all of the victims were in their 20s to 40s. All deteriorated within 36 hours. Fever, hallucinations, then massive brainstem inflammation. Spinal fluid samples were being diverted to Fort Detrick under DoD seal. It wasn't influenza, and she was beginning to suspect it wasn't natural. 0810 hours Langley, CIA Global Threat Desk. Maya Durrani hunched over a flickering display in the CIA's watch floor, fielding intel dumps from Europe and Asia. Russia had cut civilian data feeds in Kaliningrad, citing technical anomalies. Chinese satellites had gone dark for 3-hour windows overnight, repositioned without filing orbital notices. But none of that alarmed her more than the map blinking red across the US 37 hospitals. From Phoenix to Pittsburgh were dealing with acute neurological cases, clustered, rapid onset, high fatality. The epidemiological modeling didn't fit any known natural outbreak. More importantly, the vectors didn't align. The virus had appeared simultaneously in rural Georgia, East Los Angeles, and a native reservation in Montana. That's when she realized this wasn't community spread. It was placement. Maya keyed in a query on known PRC covert operations. Her results came back tagged: Operation Sunfall, unconfirmed domestic penetration, risk BRICS. A suppressed report from 6 months earlier detailed sightings of Brazilian nationals tied to illegal entry rings along the US border. Not smugglers, not cartel. Clean, military posture. Known Portuguese dialect variants used by Brazilian PMCs. Multiple had disappeared into Texas, Utah, and New Jersey. Sleeper cells. 905 Southern Texas CBP Surveillance Watchtower. A Customs and Border Protection officer tapped through heat signatures on a west-facing camera. The fog of early morning still clung to the ridgeline. 2 figures moved just past the fence. They didn't run. They walked with purpose. One paused and appeared to check a transmitter or GPS unit strapped to their wrist. Not migrants, not cartel. A third signature moved out from behind a scrub tree. Quadruped. Small. Artificial. The feed glitched, then froze. When the system came back online 30 seconds later, the trio was gone. Only dust remained. 11:25. DHS Cybersecurity Division, Arlington. Dana Upton adjusted her glasses and leaned over the intern's shoulder.
You said these addresses were fake?
Ghost, Max. They appear to be broadcast from telecom towers but don't resolve. Same signature we found last month in Atlanta.
God damn it.
The pattern was clear now. Someone, maybe multiple someones, had been seeding dormant nodes into US infrastructure for over a year. First in big cities, now creeping into Tier 2 metros. The rogue signals only activated during high traffic intervals, never long enough to trip federal alarms. But now, with hospitals going dark and CDC staff quitting en masse, she wasn't sure they had time to figure out. 11:50. DHS Cybersecurity Division, Arlington. Dana tapped through another alert just as a dashboard blinked red with trending social media hashtags. She paused.
Can you filter by origin?
Already did. They're mostly from abroad. Belarus, Brazil, Serbia. Botnets mostly. TikTok and X are the worst right now.
She scanned the trending topics. Hash no more lies, hash Fort Detrick leak, hash military cover-up, hash Emerson flu, hash virus truth. Thousands of retweets per minute. Verified influencers pushing the line that the pathogen wasn't foreign, it was made in America. A leaked CDC memo showing the virus was an escaped DARPA bioweapon. Viral videos claiming emergency morgues were being built in secret FEMA camps. Comments flooded with variations of "it's all a hoax" and "let it burn." Someone wasn't just muddying the waters, they were poisoning the well.
It's fast, coordinated, and it's aimed at the center of the country. If one person opens fire this week, we could be looking at Ohio turning into a second civil front. Get this to the NSC. We're not just being hacked, we're being turned inside out.
13 o'clock, White House National Security Council meeting. President Walter H. Emerson was late. Again. Julia sat in the back, watching from a corner chair, her notes in a leather folio she hadn't opened in 20 minutes.
We believe the pathogen originated in southern China. However, it's showing uncharacteristic dormancy periods. Incubation appears to be genetically variable, delayed activation tied to metabolic triggers. This is not naturally occurring.
Sir, we believe this epidemic is not a diversion. It is the first strike. A murmur ran through the room. The president looked tired. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for water. What proof do you have? Pattern alignment, BRICS infiltration, supply chain compromise, satellite irregularities? We've confirmed that at least 14 foreign nationals linked to Brazilian military intelligence crossed into the U.S. under legal work visas tied to agricultural robotics firms. 6 of those individuals have since disappeared.
And as of this morning, Fort Detrick confirms the pathogen has been engineered.
No one spoke. Tell no one. We don't want to panic. Not yet. Julia quietly left the room before she screamed. 15:30. U.S. Space Command, Satellite Operations Command. A technician stared at the overlapping telemetry with growing dread. 3 Chinese satellites had repositioned again, this time drifting into high synchronization paths over the Pacific Northwest. Simultaneously, 2 Russian orbital platforms dropped into low-bounce relays, setting up what looked like a full-spectrum EM web over North America.
We're not just blind, we're deaf. They're about to cut every channel.
Then it started. 16:05 Langley, CIA internal briefing. Maya's screen showed the latest from European field agents. Vilnius, blackout. Tallinn, suspected drone penetration. Suwalki Gap, Russian armor sighted. But her eyes locked on a side channel, encrypted intercepts from Brazilian naval traffic near the South Atlantic. They'd rerouted civilian cargo freighters from Cape Town, allegedly carrying renewable energy supplies. Maya decrypted one line of text from a satellite phone intercepted at sea. All elements in position, awaiting signal. She forwarded it with one word: sunfall. 1642, Brussels, Belgium. The diplomatic quarter of Brussels, normally quiet by late afternoon, was rocked by a thunderous explosion outside the NATO liaison ministry on Rue de la Loi. The target was a black-armored BMW, standard motorcade issue, belonging to Minister Helena Voss, Belgium's NATO liaison and a vocal proponent of deploying additional missile defenses in Eastern Europe. The blast killed her instantly, along with her 2 security escorts and a bystander. Shrapnel peppered nearby buildings, injuring 12 more, including 3 American staffers. CCTV footage showed a sleek black motorcycle idling across the street minutes before the blast. The rider dismounted, left the bike parked, and vanished. Seconds later, the car detonated. No organization took credit, no manifesto, no demands, only silence and fear. That night, the Belgian Prime Minister called an emergency meeting of EU and NATO leadership. Intelligence chiefs from 5 countries warned this could be a false flag or pretext operation, possibly orchestrated by an adversary to destabilize Western unity. The headlines had already been written. NATO minister assassinated in Brussels, bombing, unknown assailants, rising global tensions. 1650 hours, UK, Canada, and Mexico. At 1650 hours, the world's sense of containment cracked. Hospital alert lines in London, Toronto, and Mexico City lit up within minutes of each other, each reporting clusters of patients with identical symptoms: neurological collapse, spiking fevers, hemorrhagic episodes. British tabloids were still calling it mystery flu when the NHS issued its first internal red alert. In Toronto, paramedics arriving at St. Michael's wheeled 3 young adults straight from Pearson Airport into isolation wards as local news crews filmed from behind cordons. And in Mexico City, a doctor at Hospital General whispered into his phone to a friend at the Ministry of Health, "Esto no es gripe." By the time the separate agencies realized they were seeing the same pattern, social media had already connected the dots. The contagion was no longer an American anomaly, it was spilling across borders in real time. Within an hour, the World Health Organization broke precedent, recommending an immediate travel ban on all movement from the Western Hemisphere and the United Kingdom, warning of an unprecedented trans-regional threat. The statement rippled like a shockwave. By nightfall, dozens of countries had shut their airports and sealed their ports, leaving planes circling above locked-down runways and passengers stranded in terminals as borders clanged shut around them. 1,700 hours. White House. Julia's office. Julia sat at her desk with the windows drawn shut, the world pressing down through silence and ducted air. The city outside had the muffled quality of snow, even though it was warm. Police sirens wailed in the distance, then faded. She opened a draft, statement for contingency release, if pandemic confirmed artificial origin. We have been attacked not with missiles or soldiers, but with silence, with pathogens delivered in the breath of friends and strangers. Our enemies did not march on our cities, they walked in through the doors we left open. The flu is not the flu, and America is not alone, but the First World War of this century has already begun, and it began in the bloodstream. 1920, San Diego, emergency room. Dr. Luis Ortega removed his gloves and stared at the third young man to die on his table in 12 hours. 33 years old. No known pre-existing conditions. Lungs like glass. Cerebellum swollen to the point of cracking the skull. He had seen things like this before, in Level 4 biohaz labs, never in the trauma bay. He stepped into the hallway and looked at the stack of sealed CDC reports. One of them had been hand-delivered. No fax, no email. The top page had one word highlighted, engineered. 2,000 hours EST nationwide, 15 cities, including Miami. The protests began as candlelight vigils, scattered gatherings of citizens holding signs that read, "Tell the truth and we deserve answers." By nightfall, they had morphed into something darker. In Miami, 2 separate marches erupted, one outside Jackson Memorial Hospital, another near Little Havana. At first, chants echoed through the humid evening air. "No more lies, Fort Detrick flu, it's all a hoax." But quickly the crowds splintered. Cell phones glowed in thousands of hands, streaming live feeds. Algorithms amplified fury faster than any megaphone. Barricades of overturned cars, burning dumpsters and plastic barriers clogged the streets. Police sirens wove through the chaos, blue lights strobing off the windows of shuttered cafes. Some protesters wore surgical masks painted with slogans in red spray paint. #CDC genocide and #virus truth. On the steps of City Hall, a young woman wrapped in an American flag shouted into a bullhorn, "They engineered this! They're culling us! Don't let them lock you down again!" Her words rippled through the crowd, met with a roar of approval. Across the plaza, counter-protesters gathered, holding up signs of their own. "Stop the hoax! Stop the hate! Trust science!" The two groups collided in a storm of shouts and fists. Rubber bullets cracked. Tear gas canisters hissed. In Chicago, a convoy of trucks circled downtown, blaring horns and slogans through mounted speakers. In Atlanta, protesters surrounded the CDC campus chanting "Fort Detrick leak" until security pushed them back with shields. In Houston, riot police formed a thin line across the I-45 overpass, trying to block hundreds of angry citizens waving both U.S. flags and conspiracy placards. Fireworks exploded overhead, some celebratory, some thrown as makeshift weapons. By 2030, live drone footage from news choppers painted a map of American unrest. 15 cities spanning both coasts and the Midwest. Hashtags trending globally. #LetItBurn, #RedStateUprising, #EmersonVirus. Casualty reports trickling in. Broken bones, tear-gassed children, at least 2 shootings in Miami. Back in Washington, Julia Adler watched fragments of the coverage on a muted screen in her office. She saw the chants, the slogans, the tear gas swirling in the glow of street lamps. She recognized the hashtags, ones Dana Upton had warned about hours earlier. Her stomach sank. This wasn't protest anymore. It was acceleration. And it was only the first night. 21 o'clock, FBI Social Media Threat Operations Center, SM-TOC Quantico. The war wasn't just looming, it was already online and winning. Supervisory Special Agent Evelyn Brooks leaned over the glowing map interface in the center of the room. Across the U.S. heartland, digital red zones flared. Memphis, Indianapolis, Spokane, Omaha, pulsing like infection points. Each surge traced to coordinated disinformation networks pushing false narratives about the epidemic. Cross-signatures show Belarusian and Serbian server clusters, said her tech lead, pulling up a burst log. Same fingerprint we saw during the 2024 Brazilian elections. Botnets, AI amplifiers, sock puppet accounts, all synchronized. The hashtags now trending across TikTok, X, and fringe platforms weren't just inflammatory. They were militarized. #DARPA-flu, #Emerson virus, #CDC genocide, #Let it burn, #Red State uprising. Deepfake videos were going viral. Fake FEMA camps, fake CDC executions, AI-generated whistleblowers claiming the virus was a US experiment gone wrong. One video even showed a fabricated leaked memo implicating Fort Detrick in population cleansing. The worst part? Verified influencers were sharing them. 2145, White House South Lawn. Julia walked the perimeter alone, flanked only by 2 distant security agents. Her shoes clicked on the concrete. Across the river, D.C. glittered as if nothing had changed. But she knew better. The country wasn't sick. It had been poisoned.
Brazilian power grid just shifted to emergency frequency. Chinese naval vessels have gone dark south of Taiwan, and Baltimore has reports of a telecom outage they can't trace.
2150, Tallahassee, Florida, in transit. The Governor Sikorsky, S-76, lifted off under humid skies, blades chopping the night air. Inside, Governor Rafael Rafe Cardona sat rigid, reviewing a folder of emergency pandemic measures. His aides whispered over headsets, the whine of turbine engines drowning their unease. Below them, Tallahassee's lights shimmered like embers. The governor rubbed his temples. 3 rallies canceled in a single day, protests outside hospitals. Florida's death toll climbing faster than CDC reports admitted. His phone buzzed non-stop with calls from D.C. he hadn't returned. "ETA 15 minutes, sir," said the pilot. Then, static. The comms cut for half a breath. A warning light blinked on the panel. "Tower, we're reading." The co-pilot never finished. The aircraft lurched violently to the left, a metallic scream ripping through the fuselage. Something, no one ever determined what, had struck or failed at 2,000 feet. The chopper spun, red beacons flashing across the suburbs, and within seconds slammed into a stand of pine trees east of I-10. The explosion lit the night sky like a second sunrise. Local residents reported a thunderclap that rattled windows miles away. By the time fire crews reached the wreckage, there was nothing left but twisted steel and burning fuel. The governor, his security detail, and 2 aides were gone. The FAA immediately turned the site over to the NTSB, but within an hour, the acronym had changed in official memos. FTSB, Federal Transportation Safety Board. The quiet designation reserved for sensitive crashes with possible sabotage. The words no one wanted to say yet hung in the smoke. Assassination. 2336, Florida State Capitol, Tallahassee. The swearing-in was curt, almost surreal. Lieutenant Governor Maria Cordero stood in a marble-lined chamber, hand on a scorched Bible pulled from the emergency office safe. Her eyes were red, her blouse stained with sweat from being rushed through a gauntlet of flashing cameras and frantic staffers. "I, Maria Isabel Cordero, do solemnly swear..." The words cracked in her throat. She forced them out anyway. Behind her, National Guard officers shifted uneasily, their radios alive with half-heard reports. Scattered power outages, sudden protests, strange drone sightings near Miami. The air conditioner had cut out 20 minutes earlier. Everyone was sweating, staring at each other, waiting for something worse. When she finished the oath, there was no applause, no celebration, only silence. Reporters shouted questions. Was it mechanical failure? Was the governor targeted? Who was responsible? But she gave no answers. Instead, she leaned toward the microphone, voice trembling but steady enough to be carried live across state television. "Tonight, Florida grieves, but we will not fall. I ask every citizen to remain calm, to stay safe, and to trust that we are united in this fight, whatever it may be." Even as she spoke, The hashtags #FloridaDown, #NoMoreLies, and #PowerVacuum began trending worldwide. Inside, the chamber was silent except for the clicking of cameras. No applause followed. No congratulations. Only the hollow weight of history pressing down. When she lowered her hand, a National Guard colonel stepped forward. "Madam Governor, security brief incoming. You need to see this." Her first words as governor were not to the cameras but to him. "Tell me it wasn't sabotage." He didn't answer. "You've been listening to When the Signal Fails, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the AI Drone. This was episode 1, Engineered. The war hasn't started yet, but the countdown has. By the Whispers of Lysagora Project.